The shuttle screamed through the atmosphere, trailing smoke and fire behind it. Derek Hayes gripped the controls with white knuckles, trying desperately to keep the small craft from spinning out of control. Warning lights flashed across every panel, and the emergency alarms created a deafening chorus of disaster. He had been on a routine reconnaissance mission when 3 hostile ships appeared from nowhere and opened fire. His vessel never stood a chance. The ground rushed up to meet him faster than he wanted. Derek pulled hard on the controls, managing to angle the shuttle just enough to avoid a head-on collision. The craft skipped across the surface like a stone on water, tearing through strange purple vegetation before finally slamming into the side of a rocky hill. The impact threw Derek against his restraints, hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. For several minutes, he just sat there, breathing heavily and checking to make sure all his parts still worked. His left arm throbbed with pain, and he could feel blood trickling down the side of his face from a cut above his eye. But he was alive. That was more than he had expected 30 seconds ago. Derek activated his emergency beacon and checked the shuttle's systems. The damage was catastrophic. Life support would last maybe a day. Communications were completely destroyed except for the beacon's automated signal. The hull had been breached in multiple places. He was stranded on an unknown planet with no way to call for help beyond hoping someone picked up his distress signal. He gathered what supplies he could salvage: a medical kit, some ration bars, a portable light, his multi-tool, and a small kit of engineering equipment. Not much, but it would have to do. As Derek stepped out of the ruined shuttle, he got his first real look at the planet that might become his grave. The sky was a deep orange color, and 2 small moons hung visible even in the daylight. The vegetation was unlike anything he had seen before, with crystalline leaves that chimed softly in the wind. In the distance, he could hear the calls of creatures he couldn't identify. Some of them sounded very large and very hungry. Derek spotted a cave system in the nearby cliff face. It looked like decent shelter, and right now, shelter was his top priority. His arm was definitely broken, and he needed to set it and rest before infection or shock could set in. He made his way carefully across the alien landscape, wincing with each step. The cave entrance was massive, easily large enough to fit his shuttle with room to spare. Derek activated his portable light and ventured inside. The tunnel stretched back into darkness, but the walls were smooth and almost seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Strange markings covered some of the surfaces, symbols that looked deliberately carved rather than natural formations. He walked deeper, following the main passage as it wound through the rock. His footsteps echoed strangely, as if the cave was much larger than it appeared. After several minutes of walking, the tunnel opened into an enormous cavern that took his breath away. The chamber was filled with crystalline formations that glowed with soft, shifting colors. They grew from the floor and hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls of light. In the center of the cavern was what could only be described as a nest. It was constructed from what looked like woven metal and precious stones, easily 15 feet across, and filled with soft, glowing materials. Derek approached slowly, his engineering mind trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This was clearly artificial, clearly built by something intelligent. But who or what could have created such a thing? And more importantly, were they still here? That's when he heard it, a small pained whimper coming from behind one of the larger crystal formations. Derek moved toward the sound, one hand on his sidearm, just in case. What he found made him freeze in his tracks. Curled up in a small depression in the rock was a creature unlike anything in the known galaxy databases. It was roughly the size of a large cat, covered in iridescent scales that shifted through colors as it breathed. It had 4 legs, a long tail, and wings that were folded against its body. One of those wings was torn, with a long gash that wept a silvery fluid. The creature's head was elegant and reptilian, with large eyes that reflected Derek's light like mirrors. A dragon. Derek's mind supplied the word from old Earth myths and legends. He was looking at what could only be described as a baby dragon. The creature looked at him with obvious fear, pressing itself back against the rock. It made a small chirping sound, and Derek could see it was trembling. Around the dragon were scattered what looked like toys and trinkets. Small mechanical devices, some broken, some intact. A floating sphere that had crashed to the ground and cracked. A music box that lay in pieces. Holographic puzzle cubes with dark, inactive screens. Derek slowly lowered himself to sit on the ground, making himself less threatening. He set aside his weapon and held up his empty hands. The dragon watched him with intelligent eyes, eyes that showed far more awareness than any animal Derek had ever encountered. "Hey there, little one," Derek said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. Looks like we're both having a pretty bad day, huh?" The dragon tilted its head, studying him. Derek noticed the wing injury was still bleeding. Without thinking too much about the wisdom of approaching an unknown alien creature, he slowly reached into his medical kit and pulled out some bandages and antiseptic. He held them up so the dragon could see. "I'm going to help you, okay? That wing looks like it hurts." Moving very slowly, Derek inched closer. The dragon tensed, but didn't run. When Derek was close enough, he carefully examined the wing. The injury was clean, probably from something sharp. He cleaned it gently with antiseptic, and the dragon hissed, but held still. Derek wrapped the wing carefully, using techniques he had learned for treating his own injuries. When he finished, the dragon looked at its bandaged wing and then back at Derek. It made a soft trilling sound that somehow conveyed gratitude. Then it noticed Derek's broken arm and the blood on his face. Before Derek could react, the dragon moved closer and gently nudged his injured arm with its snout, making a questioning sound. "Yeah, that's broken," Derek admitted. "I need to set it, but it's going to hurt." The dragon watched as Derek prepared to set his own arm. It was a painful process that left him gasping and sweating, but he managed it. As he wrapped his arm in a splint, the dragon suddenly left and returned moments later dragging something in its mouth. It was a strange fruit, glowing faintly. The dragon pushed it toward Derek insistently. Derek picked up the fruit cautiously, but the dragon mimed eating motions. Figuring he had little to lose, Derek took a bite. The fruit was surprisingly sweet, and within minutes he felt his pain begin to ease. Not disappear, but become manageable. The dragon made a pleased sound. Derek smiled, despite everything. He picked up one of the broken toys, a mechanical sphere that looked like it might have floated before it cracked. "Mind if I take a look at this?" The dragon watched with intense curiosity as Derek examined the toy. His engineering training kicked in as he identified the problem. Using his multi-tool and some components from his equipment, he began to work. The dragon crept closer, watching every movement of his hands. After about 20 minutes, Derek made a final adjustment and activated the sphere. It hummed to life and slowly lifted into the air, wobbling slightly, but functional. The dragon's eyes went wide, and it made excited chirping sounds, bouncing on its feet like an excited puppy. Derek couldn't help but laugh. "You like that, huh?" The dragon grabbed the floating sphere gently in its mouth and pranced around with it before setting it carefully back in its nest. Then it pushed another broken toy toward Derek, looking at him with hope in its eyes. Derek looked at the small dragon, at the cave that offered shelter, at the collection of broken toys. He thought about his crashed shuttle, his uncertain future, and the lonely days ahead, waiting for rescue that might never come. "All right, little one," he said, picking up the next toy. Let's see what we can fix together. I'm Derek, by the way, and I'm going to call you Sparks because of those little lightning flashes on your scales." The dragon Sparks settled down next to him and watched as Derek began to work. Two castaways, two different species, alone on an unknown world. Neither of them knew that this moment, this simple act of fixing a broken toy, would one day change the fate of entire civilizations. For now, they just knew they weren't alone anymore, and sometimes that was enough. Days blended into weeks in the crystal cave, and Derek lost track of exactly how long he had been stranded. His emergency beacon continued its silent transmission into the void, but no rescue ships appeared in the orange sky. He tried not to think about the possibility that no one was coming, that his signal was too weak, or that everyone thought he was already dead. Instead, he focused on survival and on his unlikely companion. Sparks had become a constant presence in his life, and Derek found himself grateful for the company. A little dragon had a personality that shone through more clearly with each passing day. Curious, playful, surprisingly gentle, and remarkably intelligent. The intelligence was what struck Derek most. Sparks understood far more than any animal should. When Derek spoke, the dragon listened intently, and Derek could swear it comprehended his words, even if it couldn't speak them back. It learned quickly, picking up on patterns and solving problems that would challenge many humans. Derek had repaired most of the broken toys by now. Each successful repair brought excited chirps and what Derek had started to recognize as the dragon equivalent of a smile. The floating sphere now orbited the nest in lazy circles. The music box played haunting melodies that seemed to come from nowhere, Derek recognized. The holographic puzzles projected complex three-dimensional patterns that Sparks could manipulate with its claws. In return, Sparks had appointed itself Derek's caretaker. The dragon brought him strange fruits from deeper in the cave system, always testing them first before offering them to Derek. It led him to an underground stream with water so pure and clear, it seemed to glow faintly. When Derek's injuries pained him at night, Sparks curled up against his side, and somehow the dragon's presence made the hurt more bearable. Derek had even managed to improve some of the toys using salvaged components from his crashed shuttle. He made weekly trips back to the wreckage to gather parts, always checking for any signs that rescue ships had landed. They never had. But the shuttle provided a treasure trove of materials for his repairs and improvements. One evening, as Derek worked on modifying a projection device to display star maps more clearly, Sparks brought him something he hadn't seen before. It was a small mechanical figure, intricately crafted to resemble an adult dragon. The figure was damaged, with several broken pieces and a cracked power core. "This is beautiful work," Derek said, turning the figure over in his hands. "Is this special to you?" Sparks made a soft, sad sound and nodded its head. The dragon's eyes held an emotion Derek recognized immediately, because he felt it himself. Loneliness. Longing for home and family. Derek set aside the star map and focused entirely on the mechanical dragon. This repair required all his skill and attention. He worked for hours, far into the night, while Sparks watched with unusual stillness. The power core was the biggest challenge. It used technology Derek didn't fully understand, running on principles that seemed to defy conventional physics. But Derek was a good engineer, and he had always been talented at making things work, even when he didn't completely understand them. He carefully cleaned the core, replaced the damaged components with modified parts from his shuttle's power system, and used a polymer adhesive to seal the cracks. It took 3 days of careful work, testing, and adjustment. When he finally activated the repaired figure, it hummed to life with a soft glow. Then, unexpectedly, it projected a holographic image above itself. The hologram showed an enormous dragon, majestic and powerful, with scales that gleamed like starlight. The dragon spoke in a language Derek couldn't understand, but the tone was warm and loving. It was clearly a message, a recording left by someone important. Sparks made a sound Derek had never heard before, somewhere between a cry and a song. The little dragon moved close to the hologram, reaching out with one claw, as if trying to touch the massive dragon displayed above. Tears, actual tears, rolled down Sparks's scaled cheeks. Derek's throat tightened with emotion. He understood now. This was a message from Sparks's parent. The little dragon was an orphan, or at least separated from its family, just as alone as Derek was. "I'm sorry, little one," Derek said quietly, placing a hand gently on Sparks's head. "I know what it's like to miss family." He thought about his own sister, Katie, back on Earth. She ran a small toy shop in Portland, and Derek had promised to visit her after his tour of duty ended. He wondered if he would ever see her again, ever walk into her shop and listen to her excited chatter about her latest vintage toy finds. Sparks leaned into his touch, and they sat together in silence, two beings from different worlds, united by their loneliness and their friendship. The holographic message played on repeat until its power finally faded, and Sparks carefully placed the mechanical dragon in the very center of its nest, in the place of highest honor. After that night, something shifted between them. The bond grew deeper. Derek started teaching Sparks things beyond just playing with repaired toys. He taught the dragon simple games from Earth. Tic-tac-toe scratched into the cave floor. Hide and seek among the crystal formations. Even a modified version of fetch, using one of the floating spheres. Sparks loved the games, and proved to be a quick learner and a competitive player. The dragon also began showing Derek things in return. Using what Derek had assumed was technology, but was starting to suspect might be something else entirely. Sparks created illusions in the air. Images of massive creatures flying through space, cities built into the sides of stars, and ships that moved between worlds. During these lessons, Derek told Sparks about Earth, about humanity's journey to the stars, about his dreams of exploration and discovery. He talked about his childhood, about the toy trains his father built him, about learning to take apart and rebuild machines with his grandfather. He talked about joining the military not for war, but for the chance to see the universe. Sparks listened to everything with rapt attention. Sometimes the dragon would respond with its own illusions, showing Derek things that might have been memories or might have been stories from dragon culture. Derek wished desperately that they could communicate more clearly, but they made do with what they had. One afternoon, Derek was attempting to repair a particularly complex device that seemed to be some kind of educational toy. It projected mathematical equations and physical principles in three-dimensional space. As he worked, he explained his process out loud, a habit he had developed. "See, the problem is the resonance frequency is off. If I adjust this component here, it should sync with the main processing unit, and—" Sparks suddenly made an excited sound and used its claw to point at a different component entirely. Derek looked where the dragon indicated and realized Sparks was right. The component the dragon had identified was the actual source of the malfunction. Derek made the adjustment, and the device hummed perfectly to life. "You understood the technical problem," Derek said in amazement. "You're not just smart, Sparks, you're brilliant." The dragon preened at the compliment, then immediately began manipulating the educational toy, solving complex equations with ease. Derek watched in awe, realizing that Sparks's intelligence far exceeded what he had assumed. This wasn't just a clever animal. This was a being with cognitive abilities that might match or exceed human capabilities. As the weeks continued, Derek's supply of salvaged ration bars dwindled to nothing. He survived entirely on the fruits and fungi Sparks found in the deep caves. Some of it tasted terrible, but it kept him alive. His injuries had healed, though his left arm would probably never be quite right again. The broken bone had set at a slight angle, despite his best efforts. But a new problem was emerging. Derek had developed an infection from a small cut that had seemed insignificant at first. In the harsh conditions of the alien planet, with limited medical supplies, the infection had taken hold. He treated it as best he could with the last of his antibiotics, but he could feel himself getting weaker each day. He tried to hide it from Sparks, but the dragon was too observant. It noticed when Derek moved more slowly, when he struggled with tasks that had been easy before, when fever made him shake and sweat. Sparks became more protective, refusing to leave Derek's side, bringing him water constantly and keeping him warm when chills racked his body. One night, as Derek lay in the nest that Sparks had insisted they share, his fever spiked dangerously high. He drifted in and out of consciousness, lost in fever dreams where he flew among the stars on dragon wings. Sparks pressed close against him, making distressed sounds that echoed through the cave. Through the haze of fever, Derek heard something new, a deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It grew louder, accompanied by vibrations that made the crystal formations chime like bells. Sparks made urgent, excited calls toward the cave entrance. Derek tried to focus, to understand what was happening, but his mind was foggy with illness. He managed to lift his hand slightly and saw lights descending from the sky, visible through the cave mouth. Not the lights of human ships, but something else entirely, something vast and powerful that made the air itself shimmer. The last thing Derek heard before consciousness finally left him was Sparks's joyful cry, answered by deep, ancient voices that seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. Then darkness claimed him, and he knew nothing more. Derek woke slowly, fighting against the heavy fog that clouded his mind. The first thing he noticed was that he didn't hurt anymore. The constant ache in his badly set arm was gone. The burning fever that had consumed him had vanished. Even the small pains from weeks of sleeping on stone had disappeared. The second thing he noticed was that he wasn't in the cave anymore. He opened his eyes to find himself lying on something incredibly soft, in a room that defied description. The walls seemed to be made of crystal that flowed like water, shifting through colors he didn't have names for. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, gentle and warm. The air smelled sweet and clean, like spring rain on earth. Derek sat up carefully, expecting dizziness that never came. He looked down at himself and found he was wearing a simple garment made from material that felt like silk, but seemed to regulate its own temperature. His left arm, the one that had been broken, moved perfectly. He flexed his fingers in wonder, feeling no pain or stiffness at all. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding small in the vast chamber. A section of the wall shimmered and became transparent, revealing a view that made Derek's breath catch in his throat. He was in space, or rather, in a ship that floated among the stars. But such a ship! It was enormous, built from the same flowing crystal as the room, shaped like a palace from ancient myths. And all around the ship, flying in formation, were creatures that made his mind struggle to accept their reality. Dragons. Dozens of them, each one the size of a small starship. They soared through the void without any visible means of propulsion, their scales gleaming like jewels against the darkness of space. These weren't hatchlings like Sparks. These were the adults, and they were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. A section of the wall had opened, and through it stepped a dragon that made even the giants outside seem small by comparison. This one had to duck its head to fit through the doorway, and when it stood to its full height in the chamber, Derek had to crane his neck back to see its face. The dragon's scales were a burnished gold color that seemed to hold the light of stars. Its eyes were ancient and intelligent, holding a wisdom that made Derek feel like a child in comparison. When it spoke, the words came from a device that floated near its head, translating the deep, resonant sounds of the dragon's natural language into something Derek could understand. "You are awake, human. I am Zarathos, elder of the Draconis Imperium. You are aboard our vessel, and you are safe." Derek swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. "Sparks, the little dragon, is it okay?" Something that might have been surprise crossed Zarathos's massive features. "The hatchling is well, and insists on seeing you. But first, we must speak, you and I." Another smaller dragon entered the chamber. This one was deep blue with silver markings, still enormous, but more delicate in build than Zarathos. The translator identified her as Solara, scholar of the Imperium. "We have many questions, human," Solara said to her translator. "Our kind does not interact with younger species. We have watched your people from afar and found you too reckless, too quick to violence, too dangerous to approach. Yet here you are, having spent weeks alone with one of our most precious younglings. How did this come to be?" Derek explained everything: his mission, the attack, the crash, finding the cave and the injured hatchling. He told them about the broken toys, about the weeks of survival, about the friendship that had formed between him and Sparks. He left nothing out, even the parts that made him look weak or foolish. The dragons listened in silence. When Derek finished, Zarathos studied him with those ancient eyes. "Show me these repairs you made," the elder dragon commanded. Servants, smaller dragons about the size of large dogs, brought in the collection of toys from the cave. Derek's mechanical dragon figure, the floating spheres, the music box, the educational devices. All the things he had fixed and improved during his time with Sparks. Zarathos examined each item carefully, and Derek could see surprise in the dragon's expression. Solara made small sounds of interest as she studied Derek's modifications. "These repairs are excellent," Solara said. "More than excellent. You took devices you could not fully understand, and not only fixed them, but improved them. This sphere's orbit stability is better than the original design. This music box now has harmonic resonances the creator never intended, but which enhance the overall composition." "I just did my best," Derek said. "I wanted to help. Sparks was hurt and alone and scared. I couldn't just leave it like that." "Why?" Zarathos asked bluntly. "The hatchling could not offer you anything in return. It could not help you escape the planet or repair your vessel. It could not even communicate with you properly. Why waste your limited resources and time on a creature that meant nothing to you?" Derek looked at the elder dragon, confused by the question. Because it needed help. Because it was a kid, all alone and scared. What kind of person would I be if I just ignored that? The two elder dragons exchanged a look that Derek couldn't interpret. Zarathos made a sound that the translator couldn't convert, but Solara nodded in response. "The hatchling's attachment to you is clear. It refused to board our ship until we promised to help you. It has not left your side while you recovered, though we insisted it should rest. Even now, it waits just outside this chamber, impatient to see you conscious." "Can I see Sparks?" Derek asked. "Please?" The wall opened again, and in bounded the little dragon Derek had come to know so well. Except Sparks wasn't quite so little anymore. In the weeks they had been together, the hatchling had grown noticeably. It was now the size of a large dog rather than a cat, its scales more vibrant, its wings fully healed, and folded properly against its body. Sparks made joyful sounds and rushed to Derek, pressing its head against his chest. Derek laughed and wrapped his arms around the dragon's neck, feeling the happy vibrations that rumbled through its body. "Hey there, little one. You saved me, didn't you?" Sparks pulled back and looked at Derek with those intelligent eyes, then carefully placed something on the ground between them. It was the music box Derek had repaired, the one with the message from Sparks's parent. The hatchling activated it, and the hologram appeared once more. But this time, Derek noticed something he had missed before. In the background of the hologram, partially visible, were symbols that matched the official emblems now displayed throughout the ship. His stomach dropped as understanding crashed over him. "Sparks," he said slowly, "who exactly is your parent?" Zarathos answered, "The hatchling's proper name is Kirathis Starwing, royal offspring of the late emperor. The hatchling was being transported to a protected world for safety when the ship was attacked. The vessel crashed on the planet where you found it. We have been searching for weeks, and we feared the worst." Derek looked at the little dragon with new understanding. Royalty. He had been fixing toys for dragon royalty. Sparks, or rather Kirathis, seemed unconcerned with titles. The hatchling simply wanted to stay close to Derek, making it clear through gestures and sounds that they were friends, regardless of status. "You saved the life of an imperial heir," Solara said. "More than that, you showed kindness when you could have chosen indifference or even harm. You improved the hatchling's life without thought of reward. This is not something we expected from your species." "What happens now?" Derek asked, though he dreaded the answer. "You will be returned to your people," Zarathos said. "We owe you a debt of honor for protecting our young. You will be given a ship and safe passage to the nearest human station. All records of this encounter will be deleted from your technology. The Draconis Imperium must remain hidden, and you will not speak of what you have seen here." Derek felt his heart sink. He looked at Sparks, at Kirathis, and saw the same sadness reflected in the dragon's eyes. They both knew what this meant. They were from different worlds, different species. The friendship they had formed in that cave couldn't continue in the wider universe. "I understand," Derek said quietly. He spent the next day aboard the dragon ship, treated as an honored guest. The dragons fed him foods that tasted like heaven and showed him wonders beyond imagining. But the best part was simply spending time with Kirathis, playing the games they had invented together, sharing one last series of moments before the inevitable separation. On the final evening, Derek worked on one last toy. Using materials the dragons provided, he crafted a music box similar to the one he had repaired for Kirathis. But this one played a melody his mother used to hum when he was young. A simple tune about stars and home and finding your way back. He gave it to Kirathis, and the dragon carefully wrapped its tail around Derek's arm. A gesture Solara explained was the dragon equivalent of a hug between the closest of friends. "Remember me, okay?" Derek whispered. Kirathis trilled softly and touched the music box Derek had made, then went to its own collection of repaired toys. The dragon selected the floating sphere, the first thing Derek had fixed, and pushed it into Derek's hands. "I can't take this," Derek protested. "It's yours." But Kirathis insisted, and finally Derek accepted the gift. He would keep it always, he promised. A reminder of the friend he made among the stars. The dragons kept their word. They provided Derek with a small but advanced ship, and set his course for the nearest human outpost. Before he left, Zarathos spoke to him one final time. "What you did for the hatchling will not be forgotten, human Derek Hayes. The Imperium acknowledges the debt. Perhaps your species has more potential than we believed." Derek looked back at Kirathis one last time. The dragon stood at the viewing port, watching him leave. Derek pressed his hand against his own window, and Kirathis did the same with its claw. Then the ships parted, and Derek began his journey home. He didn't know, couldn't know, that this wasn't really goodbye. That the small dragon watching him leave would grow mighty and would never forget the human who fixed broken toys and asked for nothing in return. That 30 years later, their paths would cross again, and the kindness shown in a dark cave would reshape the destiny of civilizations. For now, Derek simply flew toward home, carrying a music box in his pocket and a floating sphere secured carefully in his ship, treasuring the memories of an impossible friendship, forged in darkness and sealed in starlight. Commander Derek Hayes stood at the window of his office on Unity Station, watching the stars drift by outside. His hair was more gray than brown now, and lines of age marked his face. 30 years had passed since that crash landing. 30 years since he met a small dragon in a cave, and changed his entire understanding of the universe. No one believed his story, of course. The ship that brought him back to human space had been examined thoroughly, and while it was clearly of alien origin, all identifying marks had been removed. Derek's memories were his only proof, and memory alone wasn't enough. His official report listed him as having survived alone on the planet until finding an abandoned alien outpost with a functional ship. Some people thought he was crazy. Others thought he was lying. But Derek had evidence that only he could see. The floating sphere sat on his desk, a constant reminder that it had all been real. He never demonstrated it to anyone, never turned it on where others could see. It was his secret, his treasure, his proof that magic was real and friendship could transcend species. Derek had returned to active duty for a few years, but his heart wasn't in combat anymore. Instead, he had shifted to diplomatic work and engineering consultation. He became one of humanity's leading experts on first contact protocols, always advocating for patience, for understanding, for giving new species the benefit of doubt. Some of his colleagues thought he was too soft, too idealistic. Derek didn't care. He knew what a small act of kindness could mean. He had married Lisa, a fellow officer, 15 years ago. They had a daughter named Emma, who was now 12 years old, and already showing the same aptitude for engineering that Derek had possessed at her age. Emma loved to take things apart and put them back together, just like her grandfather had taught Derek so long ago. Life was good, peaceful. Derek had achieved a level of contentment he never expected. But there was always a hollow place in his heart, a space reserved for a friend he would never see again. The comm unit on his desk chirped, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Admiral Patterson, his direct superior. "Hayes, we have a situation. Conference room 3, 10 minutes." Derek acknowledged and made his way through the station's corridors. Unity Station served as a hub for humanity's deep space diplomatic corps, a place where different cultures and species could meet on neutral ground. Humanity had made first contact with 17 different species in the 30 years since Derek's rescue. Some had become allies. Some remained neutral. A few were openly hostile. The conference room was already full when Derek arrived. Admiral Patterson stood at the head of the table, along with several other high-ranking officials. A star map hologram floated in the center of the room, showing a section of space near the edge of human-controlled territory. "Gentlemen, ladies, we have a crisis," Patterson began without preamble. The colony ship Wanderer suffered catastrophic system failures 6 hours ago. 15,000 civilians, including 4,000 children, are stranded in dead space. Their life support is failing. Murmurs of concern rippled through the room. Derek felt his stomach tighten. 15,000 people. "What's our response time?" someone asked. "That's the problem," Patterson said grimly. "The Wanderer drifted across the border into what we call the empty zone. No known inhabited systems, no known intelligent species. Our nearest rapid response ships are 18 hours out. The Wanderer's life support will fail in 12. Everyone understood what that meant. By the time help arrived, thousands would be dead. "There's another complication," Patterson continued. Long-range sensors detected unusual energy signatures in that region shortly after the Wanderer sent their distress call. Large objects, moving at speeds we can't match. We don't know what they are, but they're heading toward the Wanderer's position." Derek's heart began to pound. Large objects, unusual energy signatures. The empty zone bordered what some scouts had called the Forbidden Reach, a vast section of space that ships entered and never returned from. He thought of Zarathos's words from 30 years ago. The Imperium must remain hidden. "Sir," Derek said carefully, "those energy signatures, what exactly did they look like?" Patterson pulled up the sensor data. Derek studied it, his hands starting to shake. He had seen energy patterns like that before, on the Dragon ship that had saved his life. The readings were similar, though on a much larger scale. "I need to be on the response fleet," Derek said suddenly. Patterson looked at him in surprise. "Hayes, you're a diplomat, not a field officer anymore. What possible reason?" "Trust me, sir. If those signatures are what I think they are, I might be the only person who can help." Something in Derek's tone made Patterson pause. The Admiral studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fine. The flagship Nelson leaves in 20 minutes. Be on it." Derek ran back to his quarters and grabbed a small bag of essentials. His wife Lisa was there, having just returned from her own shift. "Derek, what's wrong?" "There's an emergency. A colony ship in trouble. I have to go." Lisa knew better than to argue when he used that tone. She helped him pack, moving with the efficiency of long practice. As Derek was about to leave, he paused and went to his desk. He picked up the floating sphere, the gift from Kirithis, and carefully wrapped it in a cloth before placing it in his bag. "You're taking that?" Lisa asked quietly. She knew what the sphere meant to him, even if she didn't know the full story. "I might need it," Derek said. He kissed her and Emma goodbye and hurried to the docking bay. The Nelson was a heavy cruiser, one of humanity's most advanced warships. Derek had never liked being on military vessels, but right now he was grateful for the ship's speed. As they jumped to faster-than-light travel, racing toward the Wanderer's last known position, Derek sat in his assigned quarters and thought about what might be waiting for them. Had the dragons really stayed hidden all these years? Had they watched humanity's expansion, judging them, weighing them? Or had they simply forgotten about the small human who once fixed toys for a royal hatchling? Long, agonizing hours, where everyone aboard the Nelson knew they were racing against time and likely losing. The crew was somber, preparing for a rescue mission that might instead be a recovery mission. When they finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the Wanderer's coordinates, what they found defied all expectations. The colony ship was there, intact and stable. Its hull lights were on, its systems clearly operational. And surrounding it, holding it gently in fields of shimmering energy, were ships that made the Nelson look like a child's toy. Dragon ships, 5 of them, massive beyond reason, built from flowing crystal and light. And moving between the ships, visible even at this distance, were the dragons themselves, dozens of them, working in perfect coordination to transfer people from the dying colony ship to their own vessels. "My God," someone whispered on the bridge. Admiral Patterson, who had insisted on commanding the mission personally, stared at the scene with wide eyes. "What are we looking at?" "First contact," Derek said quietly. "The real kind." The communication systems crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect English, translated by technology far beyond human capability. "Human vessel. This is the Draconis Imperium flagship Eternal Dawn. We detected the distress signal from your colony ship and have rendered assistance. All 15,000 of your people are safe. We have stabilized their vessel and are prepared to return them to your care." Stunned silence filled the Nelson's bridge. Patterson looked at Derek. "Did they just say—" "They saved them," Derek confirmed. "All of them. We request the presence of Commander Derek Hayes aboard our flagship for diplomatic discussion. We believe he is aboard your vessel." Every head on the bridge turned to look at Derek. Patterson's expression was a mixture of shock and understanding. "That's why you needed to come. You knew," she said. "I hoped," Derek corrected. "I hoped they might remember." Derek was transported across to the Dragon flagship in a small shuttle. As he approached the massive crystal vessel, his hands trembled with emotions he couldn't name. Hope, fear, wonder, and something deeper, the possibility of reunion. He was escorted into a grand chamber by smaller dragons, who treated him with unexpected respect. The room was familiar, similar to the one where he had recovered 30 years ago. But this one was larger, more magnificent, designed to receive important visitors. And at the far end of the chamber, backlit by the light of stars, stood a dragon that made Derek's breath catch in his throat. This dragon was massive, easily 100 feet long from snout to tail. Its scales were iridescent, shifting through colors that seemed to capture the light of nebulae. Silver and gold patterns marked its body in ways that suggested both great age and great power. The dragon wore what could only be described as regalia, bands of precious metals and gems that marked status and authority. But the eyes, Derek would recognize those eyes anywhere. Intelligent, curious, kind. The eyes of a friend. "Hello, Derek," the dragon said, its voice translated, but somehow still familiar. "It has been a long time." Derek's vision blurred with tears. "Sparks," he whispered. The dragon's expression softened into something that looked remarkably like a smile. "I have not been called that in 3 decades. But yes, it is me, though I am known now as Emperor Kyrathis Starwing, ruler of the Draconis Imperium." Derek laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and disbelief. "You became emperor? Of course you did." "Come closer, old friend," Kyrathis said gently. "Let me see how time has treated you." Derek walked forward on shaking legs, and when he stood before the massive dragon, Kyrathis lowered its great head to Derek's level. They looked at each other, and Derek saw recognition and affection in those ancient eyes. "You kept it," Kyrathis said, gesturing with a claw toward Derek's bag. "I can sense the sphere I gave you. I wondered if you would." "Every day," Derek said, his voice thick with emotion. "I looked at it every single day and remembered." Kyrathis made a sound that was somehow both a purr and a laugh. "As did I. The music box you made still plays in my private chambers. I have never forgotten the human who fixed broken toys and asked for nothing in return." "Is that why you saved the Wanderer?" Derek asked. "Partially," Kyrathis admitted, "but also because it was the right thing to do. You taught me that, Derek. You taught me that kindness transcends species, that compassion is not weakness, and that small acts of goodness can echo across decades. I have spent 30 years learning to rule, and every decision I make is influenced by the lessons learned in that cave." Derek wiped his eyes. "I can't believe this is real." "Oh, it is very real," Kyrathis said, "and it is only the beginning." The throne room of the Draconis capital world was a sight that would have broken lesser minds with its beauty. It stretched for what seemed like miles, with walls made of living crystal that sang with inner light. The ceiling opened to the sky above, showing 3 moons hanging in perfect alignment. Pillars carved from single massive gemstones supported archways that defied physics, and pools of liquid starlight reflected images of distant galaxies. Emperor Kyrathis sat upon a throne that looked grown rather than built, a natural formation of crystal and precious metal that seemed to embrace the dragon's massive form. Around the throne room, arranged in a great circle, sat the Council of Elders. 20 dragons, each ancient beyond measure, each powerful enough to reduce planets to dust with their abilities. They were not happy. "This is madness," declared Mordathis, his copper scales dulled with age. "We have maintained our isolation for 10,000 years. The younger races are dangerous, unpredictable, violent. They wage wars over resources we consider worthless. They destroy their own worlds through ignorance and greed." The human empire expands rapidly, added Silthera, her voice like grinding stone. In merely 500 of their years, they have spread across hundreds of systems. They make alliances and break them with equal ease. They fight among themselves constantly. They cannot be trusted. Kyrathis listened patiently from the throne. The Emperor had heard these arguments many times over the years. The Council had always counseled isolation, always urged distance from the younger species. Dragons lived for thousands of years and fought in terms of eons. To them, humanity was barely a blip in time, a young and foolish species that would likely destroy itself before reaching maturity. But Kyrathis knew something the Council did not. Or rather, the Emperor had experienced something they had not. "Tell me," Kyrathis said, voice carrying the weight of imperial authority. "What would you have me do about the human colony ship currently dying at our borders? 15,000 souls, including younglings not yet grown. Should we simply watch them perish?" "It is not our concern," Mordothis said firmly. "Their mistakes are their own. If we intervene every time a younger race faces disaster, we will never have peace." The human distress call was broadcasted openly, another elder argued. "Other humans will respond eventually. Let them save their own." "They cannot arrive in time," Kyrathis said quietly. "Their rescue ships are 18 hours away. The colony ship's life support fails in 12. By your logic, we should simply observe as thousands die, including 4,000 children, because intervention is inconvenient." Silthera shifted uncomfortably. "You speak with emotion, Emperor. This is unlike you. You have always ruled with wisdom and careful thought. Why do you care so much about this particular human vessel?" Kyrathis was silent for a long moment. Then the Emperor stood, and the movement alone made the elders draw back. Kyrathis was not the largest dragon in the room, nor the oldest, but the power radiating from the Emperor was undeniable. "I will tell you a story," Kyrathis said. 30 years ago, when I was still young and foolish, I was being transported to safety when our vessel was attacked. I survived the crash, but found myself alone on an alien world, injured and afraid. I had never known fear like that, never experienced true helplessness. The elders listened, some with confusion. This part of Kyrathis's history had been kept quiet, known only to a few. "A human found me," Kyrathis continued. "His own vessel had crashed. He was injured, stranded, with limited supplies, and no hope of rescue. By all logic, he should have ignored me. I was nothing to him, could offer him nothing, could not even speak to him. My presence only complicated his survival." Kyrathis activated a hologram, and there in the center of the throne room appeared an image preserved in perfect detail. A younger Derek Hayes, barely more than a youth himself, sitting in a cave, carefully repairing a broken toy, while a small dragon hatchling watched with wonder. "Instead," Kyrathis said softly, "he helped me. He repaired my broken toys with skill and care. He set my injured wing. He shared his limited food. He taught me games and told me stories. He treated me not as a thing to be used or feared, but as a person worthy of kindness and respect. And I was lost and alone. He gave me friendship." The throne room had gone completely silent. The elders stared at the hologram, at the impossible scene of dragon and human existing together in harmony. "This human, Derek Hayes, did not know I was royalty," Kyrathis continued. "He did not know my species was powerful. He helped me because it was right, because I needed help, because his heart would not allow him to do otherwise. When I was returned to you, to the Imperium, I was changed. I had learned that kindness transcends species, that compassion is not weakness, and that judging entire civilizations by their worst members is the true madness." Kyrathis deactivated the hologram and looked at each elder in turn. "I became emperor because you deemed me worthy. I have ruled for 20 years with the wisdom you claim to value. But My greatest wisdom came not from dragon teachings, but from a human who fixed broken toys in a dark cave and asked for nothing in return. One good human does not make the species worthy, Mordathis protested, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. No, Kirathis agreed, but it proves they are capable of goodness, and if they are capable of it, they are worthy of a chance to grow. We were young once too. We made mistakes. We fought wars and destroyed worlds before we learned wisdom. Who are we to deny others the opportunity we were given? What do you propose? Asked Zarathos, who had remained silent until now. The golden dragon who had once questioned Derek in another time, another place. I propose we save those 15,000 humans, Kirathis said, and I propose we use this incident to begin formal contact with humanity. Not as conquerors or saviors, but as potential allies. We will offer knowledge and assistance. We will establish diplomatic relations, and we will watch to see if they can grow beyond their violent youth. And if they disappoint us, Silthera asked, if they prove unworthy, then we withdraw, Kirathis said simply. We return to isolation with the knowledge that we tried. But I believe they will surprise you. I believe humans, given the chance and the right guidance, can become something remarkable. The council debated for hours, but in the end, Kirathis was emperor. The decision was made. Dragon ships moved to intercept the failing colony vessel, and Kirathis personally led the rescue operation. Now, standing in a chamber aboard the flagship, with Derek Hayes before him, Kirathis felt the rightness of that decision confirmed. Derek had aged, his hair gray and face lined, but those eyes still held the same kindness that had shone in that cave so long ago. You've been watching us, Derek said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Kirathis admitted. I have monitored humanity's development. I have seen your wars and your peace, your cruelty and your compassion. You are a complicated species, Derek Hayes, but you are not hopeless. And this rescue, Derek gestured toward where the Wanderer floated safely in dragon energy fields. This is you making a statement. This is me repaying a debt, Kirathis corrected. 30 years ago, you saved my life. Today, I save 15,000 of yours. But you are correct that it is also a statement. The Draconis Imperium will no longer hide from the galaxy. We will take our place among the star-faring civilizations, and humanity will be our first formal contact. Derek shook his head in wonder. Do you know what this means? First contact with a species as advanced as yours could change everything for us. I know, Kirathis said. That is why I need you, old friend. The Council agreed to contact, but they are wary. They will be watching for any sign that humanity is unworthy. I need someone who understands both species, who can help bridge the gap between dragon and human thinking. I need an ambassador who knows that kindness matters more than power. You want me to be the first human ambassador to the Draconis Imperium, Derek said slowly. If you will accept, Kirathis replied. I know it is much to ask. You have a family, a life, responsibilities. But there is no one I trust more for this task. You taught me about humanity's potential. Now help me show my people that you were right. Derek thought about his wife Lisa, his daughter Emma, his quiet life on Unity Station. He thought about the years of peace he had earned, the normal existence he had built. Then he thought about 15,000 people who were alive, because a dragon remembered friendship. He thought about the possibility of a future where humans and dragons worked together, where two species could learn from each other. I'll need to talk to my family, Derek said. And I'll need time to prepare. This isn't just about me anymore. Take the time you need, Kirathis said. I have waited 30 years. I can wait a little longer. Derek smiled. You've changed, Sparks. You're not the scared little hatchling I found in that cave. No, Kirathis agreed. But I am still the dragon who learned about kindness from a stranger who fixed broken toys. That part of me will never change. 3 months later, Derek Hayes became the first official human ambassador to the Draconis Imperium. His family joined him, moving to a beautiful residence on a dragon world where Emma could learn from dragon engineers, and Lisa could help establish cultural exchange programs. There were incidents and misunderstandings. Moments when the vast differences between species seemed insurmountable. Some dragons remained suspicious of humans, and some humans feared the dragons. But Derek worked tirelessly, mediating disputes, building trust, and always reminding both sides that connection was possible. Kirithis ruled with wisdom that surprised even the eldest council members. The Emperor made decisions that balanced tradition with innovation, always keeping in mind the lessons learned in a cave so long ago. When dragons questioned the value of helping younger species, Kirithis would show them the hologram of a human fixing toys for a hatchling who can offer nothing in return. 5 years after first contact, the Draconis-Human Alliance was formalized. 10 years after that, 3 other species joined, forming the Concordance of Stars. 20 years later, the galaxy was a different place, shaped by cooperation rather than conflict. Derek lived to see his daughter Emma become the chief engineer on a joint human-dragon exploration vessel. He lived to see his grandchildren play with dragon hatchlings, teaching them games he had once taught Kirithis. He lived to see the friendship of 2 individuals become the foundation of lasting peace between civilizations. On his deathbed, at the age of 87, Derek Hayes received one final visitor. Emperor Kirithis came personally, landing on the garden world where Derek had chosen to retire. The massive dragon moved carefully through the human-sized dwelling, until reaching the room where Derek lay. "Old friend," Kirithis said softly. "I came as soon as I heard." Derek, his body failing, but his mind still sharp, smiled. "I knew you would. You always did keep your promises." "I brought you something," Kirithis said. With gentle care, the Emperor produced 2 items. The floating sphere Derek had given Kirithis so long ago, and the music box Kirithis had received as a gift. Both were pristine, carefully maintained across decades. "I thought we should have them together one last time," Kirithis said, "for old time's sake." Derek activated the sphere with a trembling hand, and it rose into the air, wobbling slightly, but still functional after all these years. Kirithis activated the music box, and Derek's mother's melody filled the room, mixing with the soft hum of the sphere. "Not bad," Derek said with a weak laugh, "for something I fixed with salvaged parts and hope." "It was perfect," Kirithis said, "because it was made with love." They sat together in comfortable silence, dragon and human, emperor and ambassador, but more than anything, 2 friends who had found each other in darkness and created light. "When people ask how I did it," Derek said quietly, "how I became the first ambassador, how I built the alliance, I always tell them the truth. I fixed some broken toys for a friend who needed help. Everything else just followed from that." "It was enough," Kirithis said. "You were enough. You showed me that kindness matters, that small acts of compassion echo across time, that judging others with an open heart is the truest wisdom. You changed my life, Derek Hayes. You changed the galaxy." Derek smiled. "We changed it together, Sparks. You and me, fixing things one piece at a time." As Derek's eyes closed for the last time, Kirithis kept vigil, the music box playing softly and the sphere orbiting in gentle circles. When the end came, it was peaceful, surrounded by love and the knowledge that one life lived with kindness had touched countless others. The music box and the sphere were placed in the Imperial Museum, behind crystal that would preserve them for millennia. Next to them, a simple plaque read, "These objects represent the foundation of the Concordance of Stars. They were repaired by Derek Hayes for Emperor Kirithis when both were young and alone." They remind us that friendship requires no grand gestures, only open hearts and willing hands. May we never forget that the mightiest alliances begin with the smallest acts of kindness. And in throne rooms and council chambers, in schools and homes across 100 worlds, the story was told and retold. The story of a human who fixed broken toys for a dragon hatchling, unaware it would one day rule. The story of how compassion shown in darkness could illuminate an entire galaxy. The story of two friends who changed everything, one repaired toy at a time.